Okay, folks, today we're going to be talking about the 7 proven effective tactics for creating and maintaining a cult. And this information comes from an interesting book called The Social Animal, written by Elliot Aronson, who is a professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, uh, well-known psychologist in the field of social psychology, and I'm going to be using some of their language, so I suppose I might as well give them the credit. Um, okay, so when we are talking about tactics for creating and maintaining a cult, we are, in a sense, talking about a different kind of persuasion. And the question that we should be asking ourselves right off the bat is, how do people go from being regular, normal members of society that are um, going to their jobs and spending time with their families? What is this? Keep the current scheme. Spending time with their families and living their lives to suddenly being a part of this group that most people in society would say are strange or odd. And then, like in the case of the Jim Jones People's Temple, find yourself drinking, the poison Kool-Aid. How is that possible? You get to that place. So, how is that possible? Is what we're going to be talking about. So, in theory, if you've ever thought about starting a cult and then keeping it going and attracting members, I guess this is the recipe that you could use. So, number one, we'll talk about these 7 tactics, first of which is create your own social reality. And basically what we're getting at here is cult leaders try to limit the information that cult members are given. So they do this in a couple of different ways. The first thing it says here is that they can physically isolate themselves from the rest of society, as in they can move to Guyana, which is a place in South America that's far away from where Jim Jones started, which is, I think, San Francisco. Or you can do other things. If you can't move physically, you can limit some of the interactions that the people in your group have with outsiders. So it says censor their mail, prevent family visits, create boundaries between people in your group and outsiders. Second way that you create your own social reality is to start using certain kinds of language and to present certain kinds of messages about how the world really works. When we watch the Manson video, that's gonna be a fairly common theme in what he does to attract members to the Manson family. Charles Manson is really good about um, talking about a certain kind of message, however far-fetched and bizarre it seems. Okay, so create your own social reality is the first piece. Second piece, and this is again Aronson's language, create a grand falloon. We're going to remember that grand falloon means in group. So when we talk about cults, one thing that they do very well is create this sense of connectedness and community and everything that an in-group does. So newcomers, when they show up at the group, are showered with attention and support and approval. In some cases, they have certain rituals that people will go through to show the transition from being an outsider to now an insider. So if you think about, the Hare Krishnas in this picture wearing certain kinds of clothing, getting haircuts, maybe changing their name, they eat certain kinds of food, very much a distinct identity that is different from people outside of the group. And in some cases, what groups will do is to create not only that in-group identity, but also to um, start talking about outsiders as evil or the problem or um, some negative, right? Often using hateful language. So tactic number 2, create a grand falloon, i.e. in group. Third tactic says create commitment through the rationalization trap. And this is, I think, one of the key pieces in understanding how cults work, because in many of the cults that we can talk about, they end up going to places that most of us can't imagine going. For example, this is a photo of the Heaven's Gate cult. This is their leader, and that picture alone should tell you, I don't know if this is maybe the best group to join. But basically, Marshall Applewhite, the leader of Heaven's Gate, convinced his followers that the Hale-Bopp comet was coming, and it happens, once every century or something. And they are going to somehow hitch a ride on the end of the comet and go to their New World destination, however that was defined, basically the Promised Land. And in order to do that, they were going to commit mass suicide so they could hitch a ride on this comet. So this is a picture of the aftermath of the mass suicide. Notice they're all in kind of these crazy black outfits. They all had black Nikes on. And surprisingly enough, prior to their suicide, they had all, um, let's say they had performed surgery on themselves to remove some superfluous parts. You can think about um, certain parts of the male anatomy that they might want to hold on to. Yeah, they willingly volunteered to uh, lose some of their maleness. Let's just put it that way. So the question is, how do you get to that point? And frankly, the only way you explain that is by understanding this rationalization trap. And how it starts is with small requests, little things. And then it says there is a spiral of escalating commitment. So at first, you just show up to the meeting and you're hanging out and chit-chatting. And then as time goes on, you might donate some money, and then you might commit to more time, and then maybe you move in with them. These people in Heaven's Gate all live together. And then at a certain point, you're selling your house or your car, and you're donating the profits to the group. And it keeps escalating and getting bigger and bigger to the point that suddenly you find yourself, in the black Nikes, or you find yourself living in Guyana, or you're living in the desert with Charles Manson. And how do you get there? Well, it doesn't happen in one big jump. It happens piecewise along the way. It says members justify the sensibility of the initial commitment and become more willing to do more and more. So if I show up to the meetings and then I give money and then I do the next thing they ask and I do the next thing they ask, and then we get to, oh, by the way, sell your house and come live with us. Well, now I'm going to feel uncomfortable like a fool if I don't follow along. Okay, it becomes uncomfortable to renege on that deal. The other thing that sometimes is used is reciprocity, and we talked about that with the persuasion article that we read. So, number 3, create a commitment through the rationalization trap. Number 4, you want to make sure that your leader is credible and attractive. And we don't mean attractive in the physically attractive way, but attractive in the sense that this is somebody that we should follow. Generally, the leader has some kind of story or myth that talks about how or why they should be the person to follow. And the best way to do this is really to find some connection to something holy. So Jesus is used quite a bit. David Koresh, that's not his given name. He takes that name, and those are references to the Bible. This was the Branch Davidian group from Waco, Texas, that ends up being basically attacked by the federal government. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms went in, and the place ended up on fire, and there was a shootout, and it turned into kind of a disaster. The fact is they were stockpiling guns. They were doing all kinds of things. Why would Christians um, live in the middle of nowhere in Texas, stockpiling guns and getting ready for the apocalypse? Well, they thought that this guy was basically the second coming of Jesus. That was the story he was telling. So if the leader is credible and attractive, then there's more likelihood people will follow. Uh, Tactic number 5 has the word proselytize in it, and that's a new word for you. Good. We're learning vocabulary at the same time. Basically, proselytizing is going out to try to recruit new members. So if you send members out to proselytize and fundraise, you're trying to get new members, trying to raise money. And the most interesting part about this is that when you are doing this work, you are likely to be confronted uh, by people who think your group is not the best group in town, who disagree with your message, who don't want to join. And what that does is provides self-generated persuasion. That when people are confronted with negative responses or attacks from the people that they are talking to, their resolve is strengthened. They have more willpower to keep doing the hard work of their group. So you'd think it might be the opposite effect, that that's going to wear them down and make them less likely to join, but this makes them stronger generally in their wanting to fulfill the work of the group. So tactic 5. Tactic 6 um, says distract members from thinking undesirable thoughts. One thing you don't want your members to do while they're in your group is to argue about your message or to really question the things that you're telling them. So in order to disrupt that kind of thinking, there's all kinds of tactics. Some of the best use singing and chanting and different kinds of activities to keep you busy so you don't have a lot of free time. Some of the more scary things that cults will do is to deprive members of food or drink or sleep. They might use drugs. That's a common theme that you see in the Manson family, lots of drug use going on. You could also try to get people to become their own thought police. So teach them that disagreeable thought is, is actually the thing that the outsiders do. That that's what the devil wants them to think. That's right, the negative stuff we're trying to avoid. Tactic 6: distract members from thinking undesirable thoughts. And finally, the last one we have, tactic 7: fixate the member's vision on a phantom. And the word phantom here means better world or promised land. So within mainstream religions, you have things like heaven discussed as the phantom. Um, in some cults, that could be the thing they talk about. In other cults, like Heaven's Gate, it might be, whatever that promised land was at the end of the comet. One way or the other, there is some end goal generally that happens outside of this lifetime. So the reason that you keep working, the reason you keep doing the work of the cult, the reason why things on Earth might not be so great is because we have this great thing later. It gives people an incentive to maintain their purpose and gives them hope. Now, the last thing before I'm done, I want you to think about this, and we'll talk about this in class. Can you see the groups you are a member of relating to these 7 tactics? Do we see these same kinds of things? Maybe not to the extreme that you'll see in cults, but the same kinds of tactics used in the other groups we're a part of, whether it's a job or career, whether it is an extracurricular activity. My favorite example, frankly, is dance line. No offense to the dance line dancers. But you see certain kinds of things used in teams all the time. So that's another thing we can talk about. That's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. Be ready for the Manson video tomorrow.